Madam Speaker, I rise to lead the debate and have read for a second time in this Honourable House the bill shortly entitled the National Conservation Environment Management Bill 2024. Madam Speaker, this is, if I could be very informal, this is a very blow-off moment for me. And I think the entire team from the Ministry of Environment and all our stakeholders who have been working so tirelessly for the past 2 years to ensure we got to this point to debate the NCMA. However, as I always do, I have to acknowledge that our ministry, under my leadership, didn't start this process. We have to thank the former Minister of Environment, member for Nevis 10, who started the process under his leadership, and we continue. Thank you for so graciously allowing me to continue the leadership of this ministry and of this process. Madam Speaker, honourable members and citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis who have all contributed to the bill getting to its second reading, I rise today to introduce the National Conservation and Environmental Management Act, NCMA, a piece of legislation that I consider a labor of love, pun intended, which I'm certain will serve as a tremendous leap forward for our Federation's strategy towards holistic sustainability and successful administration of our National Development Planning Framework and the implementation of our vision to become a sustainable island state. As Kittitians and Nevisians, we have the privilege of interacting directly with our natural environment every single day. A 10-minute walk across the road and it will take you to the bayfront. Our forested areas are 10 minutes, are within driving distance of almost all of our communities. If you take your shoes off, it's likely that your feet in most areas will come into contact with the earth, sand, or grass, and our beaches remain public goods for all to enjoy. However, the blessing and significance of these privileges are not often realized or appreciated. The work that goes into securing our precious access points and maintaining these delicate balances that are so integral to our survival is often underappreciated and more so over the past few decades, legislatively underrepresented. And as such, I want to thank again the Ministry of Environmental and the Ministry of Sustainable Development for bringing to this Honourable House key pieces of legislation such as the Community Beautification and Safety Bill and our plastic legislation, single-use plastic ban legislation, evidence of our commitment to ensure our legislative agenda fully represents our sustainability ambitions. This act upgrades its predecessor, the NCPA, which has been in place since 1987, 38 years without change. Imagine the amount of evolution geographically, culturally, and very important scientifically that has transpired in the span of almost 4 decades. That is why we believe that NCMA is so necessary, and more so why we've championed in the ministries of environment, climate action, constituency empowerment, parks and beaches, who are here as well, solid waste management, and the Ministry of Sustainable Development, the Department of Marine Resources, the Nevis Department of Environment and Physical Planning, and all our other stakeholders, including NGOs and historic societies, the second and third reading today of this bill. NCMA modernizes our approach to environmentalism and conservation. Its very essence shifts our culture surrounding these concepts in ways that are holistic and more acutely focused on national benefit, longevity, and generational continuity in keeping, as I mentioned, with the National Development Planning Framework. No longer should we perceive the natural environment, the elements that surround us, literally, that nourish us, sustain us, house us, secure us, enrich us, as separate or isolated entities because the language and the spirit of NCEMA makes it clear that everything is interconnected. From our forests to our beaches, our history and culture, the plants, the trees, the bush, the shrubs that help to treat our illnesses and our ailments, to the soil that grows our crops and holds our foundation, everything is connected. Everything is part of a vast and interlinked ecosystem that must work in tandem for our national survival. This is the energy behind our vision and our intended trajectory for our nation's environment. It is important, Madam Speaker, that for such a bill, I think the member for number 1 said it's the largest bill he's ever read, 187, almost
127 sections.
127 critical sections, and I think our bill deserves that we go through it section by section. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Our pledge as a government, our government is unequivocally committed to the Sustainable Island State agenda. Our agenda is built on 7 key pillars and aligned to what our National Development Planning Framework insists. We plan for the future. It's intrinsically linked to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The bill's role, the old 1987 bill, it's a relic, it's the past, and it's due time that we upgrade it. SDG 13, Climate Action, and SDG 14, Life Below Water, integrating climate resilience directly into the management of our protected areas and coastal zones, as you would see in section 22. SDG 15, Life on Land, systematically protect our terrestrial ecosystems from the lush rainforest that dominates our landscape to our critical watersheds and guts, sections 4, sections 5, and sections 8. SDG 6, Clean Water and Sanitation, formally protect our watersheds and wetlands, securing our fresh water resources, section 8. SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, protect our cultural heritage and antiquities, ensuring our history is preserved for future generations, and sustainable tourism, sections 10, 12. SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, establish a robust pollution control regime, holding polluters accountable and protecting public health, part 10. Allow me to dive into the sections of the bill. Part 1, preliminary. To extend the purview of the Act in ways that are relevant, we redefine the interpretation of the term beach and included new terms such as beach access, soil, and soil conservation for more granular context. Per Part 1, Section 2, a beach is now defined as the natural area where land meets the sea, composed of sand, pebbles, or rock extending from the water's edge to the line where coastal vegetation begins, or where permanent human structures, for example, seawalls, buildings, are established, which are farther inland. This includes dunes, tidal zones, and areas shaped by wave action. The rationale behind this amendment was to simplify the definition from its more scientific and technical predecessor so that it better matches with and represents the elements that we see around us every day. It makes it easier to visualize and comprehend what qualifies as a beach and helps us understand and be better informed in our actions and interactions with our surroundings. And we will get into beach access a little later in the bill. The newly included terms beach access, soil conservation, and MAB now provide qualifiable definitions of each aspect as follows. Beach access is a designated public pathway to a beach area that allows for the passage of an emergency vehicle, ensuring quick and unobstructed access, which takes into consideration the presence of infrastructure or human safety. Soil is defined as a biologically active and porous medium that has developed in the uppermost layer of the Earth's crust. It is a mixture of organic matter, minerals, gases, water, and organisms that support plant and soil life, which underscores the complexity in the makeup of the soil and the ways in which this ecological combination is integral to healthy, thriving biology. Soil conservation refers to the practices employed for the protection and management of the soil resources to prevent their degradation, which can occur due to erosion, nutrient depletion, or contamination, underscoring the importance of protecting the integrity of this element. And MAB means the Man and the Biosphere Program, launched by UNESCO in 1971 to establish a scientific basis for improving the relationship between people and the environment, which speaks to our local St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, which is a precious source of much of our nation's biodiversity. And of course, in Part 2, the administration of the bill, a key component of Part 2 of the Act is the establishment of the National Environmental Council, which consists of the following public officers: Director of Environment, representative from the Department of Agriculture, St. Kitts, the Disaster Management Agency, Department of Physical Planning, St. Kitts, Ministry of Tourism, St. Kitts, Physical Planning Department on Nevis, the Department of Marine Resources, and 2 NGOs. One person from civil society who has knowledge or experience with respect to matters relevant to the functions of the Council. The Council will be entrusted with advisory and information sharing duties with the aim of assisting, informing, and complementing the work of the Department of Environment, the competent authority in this bill. Part 3, Environmental Management. This section speaks to a national environmental management strategy for our federation that includes a description of the environment of St. Christopher and Nevis, an analysis of environmental issues and national significance, and the environmental management strategies to be prescribed to address the issues set out in paragraph B above. Our goal is continuous, comprehensive environmental assessment so that our decision-making and actions are relevant and guided by data and institutional understanding of the issues. By doing this, we hope to increase the accuracy of our information and the accountability of measures and consistency of information sharing with the public. Now, under environmental management, I want to raise just one example. Oftentimes, developers or persons interested in accessing land would come to the Ministry of Sustainable Development and they would say to us, especially in the Canada estate area, I want to use a piece of land here to do this particular type of activity. As per usual and as per protocol, the request is sent to our technical officers and we say to them, please assess whether this land can be used for such. And the report, which goes either to Lands and Surveys, the Physical Planning Department, or the Department of Environment, can come back and say, unfortunately, this land is close to a very environmentally sensitive area, and this is the mangrove in Canada Estate. And no matter how much we explain to developers that the area is sensitive, it's biologically important, and we're working on conservation, what we see is a consistent and incessant need. We need land. We need land to construct. We need land to do this. The NCMA gives us more teeth, gives us more authority to say to developers, to interested landowners, that your intentions have to be within the parameters of environmental management. So it's not that the Ministry of Sustainable Development doesn't recognize the need for persons to have access to land and develop their trade, especially in an area designated for industrial activity, but that it has to always bear in mind the sensitivity of the biodiverse areas in Canada Estate in particular. As it relates to Part 5, the establishment and management of protected areas. Madam Speaker, Part 5 pertains to protected areas, which in my opinion are the lungs and lifeblood critical for our country. And I want to reference what the key changes are in Part 5 of the bill. This act in particular, this act in particular provides clear and transparent processes for the preparation of protected area system plans, which interconnects with other relevant legislation such as our National Physical Development Plan, developed in accordance with the Development and Control Act. When addressing the issues of protected areas, we must acknowledge the inherent linkages that across ministries. This particular section not only has environmental considerations, but also encompasses land management, as I previously referenced, as well as agriculture. As such, following numerous consultations with the Ministry of Agriculture, including the Department of Marine Resources and other relevant stakeholders, we have incorporated under Section 35, subsection 4, the means for cooperation in instances of conflicting objectives. I'll pause here to share that the ministry, this is like being in school. There's so many sections and I want to do justice to everybody's contribution to this bill, so please bear with me as I turn from paper to paper. The ministry reached out to Clarke for a review of our NCMA proposed amendments ahead of our presentation here in Parliament. And one of our first challenges was the overlapping responsibilities with the bill that directs the marine resources, the FAMRA, as well as the proposed changes in NC. During our consultations, which happened up until Monday, 8 p.m., with over 62 stakeholders, this was also raised. The reference from Clarke reads, reference is made to the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment's request, 7th April 2025, to review the National Conservation and Environmental Management Bill 2024 and its compatibility with the Fisheries, Aquaculture and Marine Resources Act 2016. In relation thereto, I have the honor of informing that the SKNIS Agreement Secretariat has reviewed the version sent and is pleased to enclose its preliminary legal advice on the questions raised. In addition, we would like to commend the government for the high alignment of the NCM bill, which demonstrated towards the SKNIS Agreement. Nonetheless, the Secretariat has included the note some recommendations to further integrate the provisions of the SKNIS Agreement that should be useful. The areas of potential contention, including institutional authority, where both Department of Environment and Department of Marine Resources have overlapping enforcement and regulatory roles. Lack of defined boundaries between terrestrial and marine mandates could lead to administrative duplications and disputes. The definition of environment in the NCM bill, protected area governance, permitting and licensing, enforcement mechanisms, and jurisdictional scope. And with this review from UN Clarke, we then engage further with the Department of Marine Resources to find ways in which there could be no overlap of roles and more collaboration. So, Section 35, subsection 4, the means of cooperation in instances of conflicting objectives is dealt with. And here it says, where provisions of this act conflict with the Fisheries, Aquaculture, and Marine Resources Act, FAMRA, the department shall consult with the competent authority under the Act with a view to ensuring consistency and cooperation in management of marine resources. And Madam Speaker, this is something that our ministry is stressing. There is no separation of the water, of marine resources, of air resources, and terrestrial resources from the environment. It's all encompassing. And that's why this bill becomes the mother of all bills, but still does not prevent the Department of Marine Resources and other stakeholders from performing their duties according to the authority vested in them with their regulation. And because we recognize The only way to advance our agenda for sustainability, for climate resilience, environmental conservation is through collaboration. This bill, NCM, clearly states that we shall be performing our duties through consultation and cooperation. This retains the sovereignty of the work of each ministry, Department of Agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture, Department of Marine Resources, the Department of Maritime Affairs, and the Department of Environment, and their accompanying legislative mandates without causing duplication or compromising effectiveness. And we really do look forward to continuing the work alongside the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Maritime Affairs, towards harmonizing our offices and our efforts. Together we work to protect our one environment. Part 5, the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park. Madam Speaker, the Act includes considerations for the continuation of the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park, and its passage does not in any way repeal the effect of the former Act as specified in paragraph 43. Allow me to reference the NCM Bible with this. So, the Brimstone Hill Fortress in particular understands and appreciates that the Ministry of Environment et al. Continues to support its mandate, its operation, and its relevance for cultural and heritage tourism, and to respect its own status as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is something that we do not take lightly. Now, for Brimstone Hill in particular, I know the Attorney General once served on their council, and I did so also when I was younger, when I was a student. And it really gives me great joy that we can return here and continue the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park, the continuation of its presence and its existence as a national park. The area described in the first schedule and declared by the former Act in recognition of its national and international significance as an outstanding cultural and historical resource to be the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park with effect from the 23rd day of October 1987 is preserved and continues in being for the purposes of this Act, so that its identity is not affected by the repeal of the former Act. So Brimstone Hill is duly protected, and its National Park Society can continue its amazing work in preserving an area of cultural and historic significance. Part 6, the St. Mary's Biosphere. Perhaps this is one of the most exciting inclusion in the NCMR for me personally, and I know for the entire ministry. One of the landmark aspects of this act is that it entrenches the designation and status of the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve as a nationally protected area to be managed in accordance with the international standards set by the UNESCO MAB statutes, the MAB management plan, as well as other international obligations. Now, had we had enough time, a very beautiful and inspiring video of UNESCO and the biosphere would be here, but we will share it online. And this is just in rec. I pause just to say that the committee led by the Ambassador Dockery, the UNESCO, which deals with the MAB, has been working very hard, assiduously for the past 2 years to get this reality here in our bill and to have what we have, the designation of MAB as a protected area or area of special interest. So I pause to celebrate their work, their leadership and championship of an area of international significance, which is now getting its national significance. Importantly, the Act transfers custodianship to the Department of Environment, previously managed by the Ministry of Education, and we thank the member for number 1 and the Minister of Education for collaborating and so willingly providing us the pathway to transfer the custodianship to the Department of Environment. in this changing of hands from the Ministry of Education has been a work in progress for many years. And of course, again, I have to express my gratitude to all stakeholders involved, including the coordinator, Mrs. Telco Wallace, Ambassador Dockery, as I mentioned, for their contributions to the MAB project, and moreover, the ceaseless work to make this development a possibility. Special thanks to the community of MAB volunteers, the students and teachers, and community leaders, tour operators, and historians who have been the champions of this program. This is reminding me, as I mentioned, teachers and students, that we really ought to just serve wherever we are placed. And when I was placed at the Keon High School, I had no idea that I would be attached to the UNESCO MAB program with the geography students from first farm upwards to fifth farm, and that it would have such a significant impact on the students' lives. The workshops, the training, the experiences in Keon River, cleaning the river, walking the river, going down to the most beautiful part of St. Kitts and Nevis, second most beautiful part of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Hermitage Estate in particular, and really engaging with nature, engaging with biodiversity and volunteering. And now to stand here as the minister making this happen along with the MAB committee, it really is like a full circle moment that has to, I have to say, blossom wherever you are planted, regardless of the circumstances. You just never know when you're going to turn around and be the minister. The handover and the inclusion of Part 4 in the NCEM is a testament to the Ministry of Environment et al. Dedication to expanding alignment across systems and making it unavoidably clear that environmental conservation and management can never be a one-dimensional undertaking. And as such, it is important that I read this section for the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, designation and status. The St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, as designated by UNESCO under the Man and the Biosphere Program and inscribed under the World Network of Biosphere Reserves, is hereby recognized under this Act as a nationally protected area and shall be managed as a biosphere reserve in accordance with UNESCO MAB statutes, the MAB management plan, as well as the international obligations under existing and future conventions, treaties, and national legislation. The reserve shall be governed by a zoning framework, including a core zone for strict biodiversity protection and conservation, a buffer zone for conservation, research, monitoring, education, and limited sustainable activities, and a transition zone where community engagement and models of sustainable development practices are promoted. Section 5, Part 50 speaks to the management authority. And we continue to Part 51, the prohibited activities in the MAB, the community engagement, biosphere regulations. And I want to say that the MAB committee is very active. If you know and have seen them walking around in their black, they engage with the community. They have several significant projects ongoing, including one that's dear to the ministry on the ban on single-use plastics. The additional project that we're working on with them with Ambassador Joyelle, who I should also mention, who has been an international champion for the MAB. So I think we should really celebrate this designation that the MAB is now a protected area nationally. It aligns with the international designation, and it's now housed and protected by the Ministry of Environment. The St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, it's a community gem. It offers so much to the people of Otleys, Keon, Keys, and Canada Estate, and it's crucial not only for biodiversity, but also for the retention of history, culture, and heritage, as it houses Otleys Plantation, Keon Village Historic District, Maroon Settlements, Hermitage Plantation, and so many other significant and beautiful historical sites for our farmers, agricultural sector on a whole, and for our tourism sector, our tour guides and hikers, and of course the education of our student and youth. In Part 7, the conservation of biological diversity. Part 7 on biological diversity creates a strong bridge between conservation policy and community livelihoods. For the first time, it establishes a coherent legal framework to conserve and sustainably use our natural heritage by mandating the Department of Environment to prepare and implement a national biodiversity strategy action plan. This will interlace biodiversity into vital sectors of our economy: tourism, agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. In this way, we are working to formalize St. Kitts and Nevis's international and multilateral commitments under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that calls for us to ensure that the health of our ecosystems directly supports food security, water security, and climate resilience. It's important that I note, Madam Speaker, that the NCM not only allows us to take local action, but allows us to align our legislation with international obligations. So our connections with the Montreal Biodiversity Protocol is very significant, especially as it relates to accessing key resources and financial support for biodiversity preservation in St. Kitts and Nevis. The Act goes even further by requiring the protection of our flora and fauna and the monitoring of key ecosystems. It introduces strong provisions for forest management, hunting regulation, and fire prevention, which empowers the work of the forestry unit to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis to sustainably and mindfully enjoy the peace and tranquility of our forest. Now, we may take this for granted, but a significant percentage of our tours, from the persons who come off of the cruise ship, persons who stay over in St. Kitts, are nature-based tours. Am I correct? And they go to our forest, our protected forest, our Central Forest Reserve. Working together, the Ministry of Tourism, the Forestry Unit, the Department of Environment, and the Ministry of Agriculture under the NCM can protect what is vital not only for biodiversity, but for tourism-based livelihoods and for community-based livelihoods. You can't just randomly go into the Central Forest Reserve and chop wood. You can't randomly cut trees.
Hallelujah.
Especially 300-year-old trees. How the cat pick gonna wear that? This bill is so significant because what we really need to establish here in St. Kitts and Nevis are guidelines and standards, rules, order. Order. If you want to cut a tree, there is an approach. There is a Ministry of Agriculture, there's a Ministry of Environment, and a Forestry Unit. If you want to do a forest tour, there is an approach, Ministry of Tourism. What we don't want in particular, and what we have heard, we don't want you to take persons, visitors in particular, students to the forest and give wrong information. And that's why it's so critical that we understand the resources of our forest, we document them, and we know what they're for, and we can impart and share that knowledge with visitors and with students. The significance of why we are so connected to sitting under the banyan tree. The significance of why a forest walk or putting your feet in the river in the forest is so crucial to the people of Keon and Spooners. These are the experiences that we want to preserve, the resources that we want to keep alive. Hence, the Section 7, which speaks of conservation of biological diversity, is so important. The protection of wildlife, ecosystem habitat conservation, managing invasive alien species. And if we know, the biggest culprit here is our green monkey. I know we used to say green vervet monkey. Let me look at the Ministry of Environment and ensure I'm saying this correct, but we have our own species now, which is the green monkey, correct? Correct, right? It's so prolific. It's now its own species, and it's problematic to everyone, to farmers, to homeowners, to So managing this invasive species in particular is allowed, protected, and prohibited, and allowed here under the NC. Part 8, access to genetic resources. And I'll move a little slowly in explaining this in particular. This moves our environmental governance into a new and exciting frontier. The management of genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their use. We say all that to say for generations, scientists and corporations around the world have benefited from the natural wealth and indigenous knowledge of small island states. The teas, the bushes, the natural remedies they have tremendous worth and tremendous value, and they're utilized without fair recognition or compensation to the source countries or local communities. This section of the bill works to correct these imbalances by asserting the sovereign rights of St. Kitts and Nevis over the genetic resources obtained from our lands. It establishes clear procedures for access, ensuring that any local or foreign researcher, institution, or company seeking to utilize our genetic material must first obtain requisite approval from the Department of Environment and must enter into an access and benefit sharing agreement. The agreements will guarantee that our people receive tangible benefits, whether through royalties, technology transfer, research collaboration, or community development projects, whenever our biodiversity or our traditional knowledge contributes to commercial, internationally recognized innovation. And we consulted widely on this to ensure that we protect our sovereign rights and our genetic resources. Researchers cannot come to St. Kitts and decide that they're going to excavate at any of our fortresses or our protected areas without permission. They cannot take that information back to their schools, whether it's Harvard or wherever, and publish without recognizing or having that right to access our information here. There's a process through the Department of Environment, and I want us to share this widely so that you know there is no way you can access environmental or genetic resources in St. Kitts and Nevis without permission. It's very disheartening sometimes. You go overseas and you see our local bush marketed, packaged with all sorts of healing benefits, cancer benefits for soursop, etc. And there's no connection to our islands, to our resources. And this is where this bill prevents anyone from simply coming and hacking our resources and taking advantage of it. These agreements, again, will guarantee that our people receive tangible benefits through royalties, technology transfer, research collaboration, or community development project. It's a research with a focus on genetic resources. It establishes a formal state-controlled process for any research in St. Kitts and Nevis for genetic resources, be it plants, animals, microorganisms. There must be prior informed consent and permitting. In-country research is prioritized. You can't take it and leave with it. We want to prioritize local research. Mandatory involvement of national counterparts. There must be knowledge sharing and capacity strengthening. You can't bring all your researchers here and not connect with local researchers. Reporting and transparency. And of course, there must be a provision to help build profit under the relationship that is operationalized through the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing. So this again, Madam Speaker, is connected to another international convention. Part 10, and I'm almost there. National Resource Management, Watershed, Wetlands, and Guts. The effective protection and management of watersheds, wetlands, and guts underpin the national vision of sustainable resource use, climate resilience, and environmental stability. In Pillar 2 of our Sustainable Island State Agenda, which speaks to water security, and for the purposes of this, I must emphasize that this extends beyond our indoor plumbing to encompass the management of these areas, especially where they traverse privately owned lands. Important to note is that under Section 68, subsection 1, all guts in St. Christopher and Nevis are declared to be areas of special concern to be managed in public interest as stable and productive natural drainage channels. Further, in Section 4, it is noted that a person who pollutes a gut or deposits litter in a gut commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $100,000 and to a further fine of $500 for each day during which the pollution continues to litter and is not cleaned up after conviction. Those are some good hefty fines. I like that. And I want to say that our rapid response teams between solid waste, parks and beaches, and the Department of Environment have video evidence of persons taking their commercial waste to gut sites to dump. Many of us walk along gut sites and we see waste. The waste, they don't wash from the mountain. There are no communities in the mountain. We take them there. I just cannot understand why it's easier to hire a trucker to take waste to a gut side. You have to drive up a hill. You have to go through rough terrain to dump garbage, as opposed to taking it to the solid waste landfill, where the tipping fee is so negligible and it costs probably less than you would pay the trucker to take the garbage. Help me make sense of that. Does that make sense? It makes no sense. And it's really a reckless approach to not just the environment, but our own health. You're taking it sometimes to gut sites, which are waterways. Water that eventually gets to our pipes. We are doing an injustice to the environment with reckless and illegal dumping. And this is not a lack of monitoring, a lack of investigation by the department. This is just people willful. Even after the Ministry of Environment for Constituency Empowerment has had over 3 national cleanups, people still find it necessary to take their waste to the gut side. We want you to stop doing that. And this is like a public cry, like shame on you for doing it. Shame on the truckers for doing it, and shame on anybody for seeing it and not reporting it. But shame is one thing. What we need now is collaboration and reporting. When you see this, call our ministries, call the police, report. Take a picture of the license plate number and send it to us, and we will find those persons. It's the same for illegal sand mining. There are persons who sign is up, no sand mining, and in the dead of night or early morning, they're on the beach excavating. There are reasons why we say no sand mining. At Beltet, for example, that's in Sandy Point, we've mined that area to the point, I think the last report from our environmental officers was that we reached bedrock, like there's no more sand. There's no more sand. There is also cases where persons have taken to mining sand on Frigate Bay. I want to remind us that the designated areas for sand mining are clear to all truckers and excavators, and Frigate Bay is not part of that. If anybody brings gold sand to your house for construction, you should report them and return it because it is illegal. And you have to remember the cycle here. If we mine the sand at Frigate Bay, it means, and the Southeast Peninsula, it means we are impacting not just our recreational activities for swimming, it means we're also impacting our tourism-based activities, because tourism still remains the largest contributor to our GDP, which means the most money that's pumped into our economy comes from tourism and tourism-related services, which means that a significant percentage of jobs are in the tourism sector. We cannot affect our livelihoods, we cannot affect our environment so recklessly. So I want us to use this opportunity in the passage of this bill to really be the vanguards, the protectors, to be the policemen and women of our environment. If you see illegal dumping, if you see illegal sand mining, report it to one of our authorities. In part 10, the ecosystems management, this addresses an area that is extremely dear to our people and our culture, the coastal zone. Not only is it home to a rich and vibrant community, but our beaches and our seashores and spaces of enjoyment, of relaxation, and of course, as I just mentioned, of revenue generation. Under section 71, it is declared that, and I read this slowly, all rights in and over the beach are vested in the Crown, and all beaches in St. Christopher and Nevis are hereby declared to be public beaches. So I'll read that again for emphasis. Unlike places, other Caribbean islands, which I won't name, Jamaica in particular, all rights in and over beaches are vested in the Crown, and all beaches in St. Christopher and Nevis are hereby declared to be public beaches. In section 73, subsection 1 says, no person shall undertake or permit to or cause to be undertaken operations for the construction or erection of any temporary or permanent building or other structure of works on the beach or other land within 30 meters landward from the high water mark. Now I say this to say, Madam Speaker, that nobody but the Crown owns the beach. No man can set up shop on the beach and claim title or ownership to the beach. Nobody but the Crown owns the beach. So in cases where persons feel, unlike the squatters regularization programs which we conducted last week, where you're on land and government can willingly transfer title to you for that land, government has no authority to transfer title, ownership, or squatters' rights to any person, any entity or business occupying Crown Beach. But I'll let the AG speak to that a little later. And I want you all to appreciate that when we make decisions in St. Kitts and Nevis, it has to be governed by legislation. So all the issues we're hearing now about ownership of beach, especially on South Friars Bay, has no basis in law. No person, no business can own beach or claim rights to the beach or refuse to move from the beach when instructed by the government. No matter how powerful your lawyer is, there's no interpretation that can conflict with this. As coastal lands have increasingly been developed for tourism and private residences, public access points have significantly been reduced or obstructed, which naturally results in some amount of skepticism and discontent. And this is why this bill is so particularly important. This act reaffirms that beaches remain public property up to the high water mark. There is no such thing as a private beach in St. Kitts and Nevis. No such thing. This obligates that developers maintain reasonable and safe public access where feasible. Another issue of importance to coastal zone management is sand mining, which I recently mentioned, above the high water mark under section 72 and subsections 4 and 74 subsection 1. This activity is declared prohibited, save for the exceptions that are informed by consultation with the Department of Environment. Ultimately, this act promotes integrated coastal zone management as a means of coordinating policy and planning and strengthening infrastructure resilience to coastal erosion, flooding, and sea level rise. And I pause here, Madam Speaker, to bring to the fore the experience of our sister country, Jamaica, sister through CARICOM. Black River, St. Elizabeth, you've all seen the videos. Totally devastated. Coastal community, totally devastated years before Black River, St. Elizabeth, Black River becomes what it was, and Treasure Beach. And I've been to these places. And one thing about them, they have a very, I think it's the same for all colonial cities and colonial towns in the Caribbean, they feel like home. But one thing the environmental space in Jamaica has questioned since the passage of Hurricane Melissa was building codes and standards and regulations, monitoring and evaluation of permits that were permits given for construction too close to the beach, to the coast. If we are to protect people, citizens, homeowners, persons who have livelihoods in coastal areas, then we must have strong legislation. If we're to protect persons in a Category 5 storm, which we do not wish on anybody else, then our building codes, our Development Control Planning Act, our NCEM has to be strong. One of the challenges that we have in the department with our mangrove restoration project is that many of our mangroves are on privately owned land. And there must be more cooperation and collaboration with private homeowners to ensure our restoration projects are successful. Because if we know anything from mangroves, we know that their purpose is to break water. It's the first natural barrier to storm surges during a hurricane. So we have to really look holistically, not just at the environmental conservation, but at the matching and complementary building codes and development control act. In part 10:11, soil conservation, the length of this section is definitely not an indicator of its importance. Although it's relatively short, it speaks directly to one of our single most important resources, soil and soil assets. And I dare say that this is something that we have taken for granted. It supports us. It supports every ecosystem. All the activities that sustain life on this planet start with soil. Healthy soil is imperative for viable agricultural productivity, which is an inextricable feature of food security. Our farmers, our rural communities stand to be most impacted by soil loss and deterioration. So this section provides standards for understanding soil, for ensuring its conservation via proper use. And I want to remind us also that soil management is so critical to preventative measures. For example, poor soil management, excessive runoff, increased flooding. Poor soil management, excessive runoff, increased siltation in our water resources. And so there is a need for us to be more mindful. And remember, I started in my statement by ministers that when we designate land, we do our soil testing. We clear the area and we test, so you know what soil is most appropriate for what activity. So we have to be more mindful. We have to work together more collaboratively, farmers, producers, construction workers, to manage and maintain the soil. Pollution control. Madam Speaker, under Section 12, which speaks to pollution control, it establishes the Department of Environment's oversight of unauthorized release of pollutants into the land, the water, and the air. It also makes provision for obtaining department-issued pollution control permits and measures that minimize pollution at sources. Ultimately, what this part instructs is that progress should not come at the expense of our rivers, our coastal areas, forested lands, or our atmosphere. And so responsibility must be enshrined in the ways we operate and carry out business. In part 13, Antiquities and Cultural Heritage, and this also is a section that is so critical for the Ministry of Tourism. If our natural physical environment were to be viewed as our nation's body, then antiquities and cultural heritage could be considered its soul. So both of them are inseparable, working together to shape our identity as a twin island federation. Madam Speaker, the Act recognizes this truth by placing a strong emphasis on the protection of antiquities and cultural heritage under this section. Across our islands, there are sites that connect us to our past, and especially they require protection, documentation, management, preservation, and in some instances, restoration. Under this section, we did wide-scale consultation, working closely with the St. Christopher National Trust, the Heritage Society, the Nevis Historical Conservation Society, and the St. Kitts and Nevis National Archives, the Ministry of Culture, Tourism, the Development Control and Planning Board, local landowners and communities, historians, archaeologists, and universities, the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park Society, and UNESCO. All these stakeholders are critical to antiquities and cultural heritage, in particular the St. Christopher National Trust. And I'll say something which is, I think it's important to say it even if it's slightly controversial, but nothing really in this bill is controversial. We're all going to support it completely. I think one of the most recent cases of interest in spaces of cultural heritage and historical significance was the Fort Thomas Hotel and its recent, the proposed development, and I think we have all seen the proposal from the developers. And on both sides of the discussion, we have architects and designers who want designs that are in line with our experiences, our history, our trajectory, and there are environmental and historical conservationists who also feel that Fort Thomas Hotel is an area of historical significance. We reached out to the Development Planning, Control Planning Board, who indicated that unfortunately, don't know the reason, this is what we met, the Fort Thomas Hotel was not listed as one of the national treasures to be protected under the National Trust. While we can't reverse that particular action, what we did was allow the members who had historians and archaeologists who had serious interest in Fort Thomas to connect with the developers so that the plans could be mindful of the historical significance of Fort Thomas Hotel. And this is what we want to do when we speak to collaboration. We want to ensure that all interests are heard, seen, understood, appreciated, and as far as possible, there is conversation to ensure development is in line with our cultural aesthetics, is in line with our conservation and historical conservation requirements. So I'm happy to report that that partnership or collaboration has been established through the Development and Control Planning Board, and where possible, the National Trust will work towards ensuring greater protection of our historic resources. But I must also say the example and experience of the Hermitage Plantation. We have homeowners who want, no, I don't have the right, the look on the houses with the cut stone. Everybody wants cut stone on their property. And unfortunately, what we've had at Hermitage Plantation is a raping of our history. People literally go down there and break off the stones from the mills and take them back to their homes and put them on their home. Like how you pass through your door knowing that you just thief stone and put it on your building. Can't be a good feeling. It can borrow permanently. And this has happened throughout St. Kitts and Nevis. We don't see our mills, our sugar mills, as a critical part of our history. And so we're literally just stealing and then reconstructing our homes with them. And it's ridiculous. And this pillage is something that we have to fight. And again, we're going to do so collaboratively. Now, Hermitage Plantation in particular, it's a biosphere reserve. How do you feel that internationally the world has recognized this place as an area of cultural and environmental significance, yet we don't care and we just go and take these stones and put them on our homes? This is an act that we have to fight, we have to desist if we're part of this. The stone cutters, they are just do it the the artificial way, and please leave our stones as they are part of our history. What is important, however, is that there are persons who care about this. The Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park reached out to us recently and don't have the official name of the group of women from Newton Ground, but they also reached out and they said that they want to protect. There is a mill right there opposite the primary school that they also want to protect. So identify your resources, bring them to the attention of the department, and we'll work collaboratively to protect that critical part of our history. In environmental impact assessment process is also protected under this new bill, this new act, and NCEMA incorporates the process of environmental impact assessments, social impact assessments in particular, in conjunction with the Development Control and Planning Act and the Director of Physical Planning. The National Environmental Fund, as we near the end. This part speaks to the establishment of the National Environmental Fund, which will be designated as a sustainable source of financing to be used directly for environmental management programs. This includes monies appropriated by Parliament, all monies given by way of gift, donation, endowments, grants made by regional and international organizations, monies generated from fines, I hope that's the least contributor, that means we're acting good, and interest accrued from the fund. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, blow off. I read in the audience, I'm done. So, in conclusion, and I want to be a little bit more personal here by saying this script was live up until an hour ago. The drafters, the writers, the researchers have been in this script working to ensure everything is correct. In fact, when I came in this morning, early this morning, one of the latest contributions received was from NIVIS, and we did political consultations with political parties as well, and we did receive one from the NRP, which questioned the functions of the NCEMA as it relates to the Nevis Island. And I mentioned earlier, and the Attorney General will speak more deliberately to this, that in consultation and through consultation with the department, the Nevis Department of Physical Planning and Environment will also have its authority to enact the NC. And we've demonstrated this with our single-use plastic ban and the work that we did collaboratively on that, and the fact that Nevis also sits on the National Council, and Nevis also sits on our solid waste, once they send their nomination, Solid Waste Management Corporation Board here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So this does not prevent Nevis in any way from exercising its own island administration duties, but work collaboratively with St. Kitts as this is a federal bill. I reluctantly accept that talking about the environment and its conservation and all the systems and activities and considerations that are involved in this process will seldom be an appealing topic. But, and I've said it ain't sexy yet, but it's getting there, right?
No.
Oh, that's inappropriate
Yes,
parliamentary language. It will eventually be trendy and something, a talking point that everyone would want to jump in on. Appropriate?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But I truly believe that if we work to make the interlinkages apparent, how each sector is connected, how every part of the environment is connected, and how it intersects and cross-connects, then, and how it affects everyone from the youngest to the oldest, from urban centers to rural communities, tourism sector to agriculture, sustainable development to development and planning control, parks and beaches, solid waste, etc., and constituency empowerment, that it would touch the tangible part of our life, especially since it touches our cultural and heritage realities so well. The environment shapes us. It makes us who we are as St. Kitts and Nevis. And we are creating our culture, our livelihoods, and our future from the environment. It's everything. It's everyone. It's health, it's wealth, it's sustainability. It's a mosaic of our collective action. And the essence of the environment is embedded in NCEMA. This act not only modernizes its predecessor, but it comprehensively packages the full extent of environmental conservation, management, and backs that with systems, standards, accountability, monitoring, tracking, recourse, and remediation. So today, as I bid this act safe passage, please allow me to thank all of the members of the gallery who are here with us, who all contributed in some way to this bill, to all our stakeholders, to the persons who participated in our consultation since 2019, to the former Minister of Environment, to the Nevis Island Administration, to the UNESCO MAB, to everyone who in some way commented, shared their opinions, or questioned every aspect of this bill. The 2 hours that I spent here, it wasn't 2 hours, the hour that I spent here had to be spent because I needed to allow all of their collective voices to ring true in this presentation. I know that the efforts of the Department of Environment and the Ministry of Environment in particular have been correctly allocated towards the upskilling of our achievement for a sustainable island state. This bill has been extensively researched, consulted on, deliberated, drafted with precise intent to build systems that are strong enough and robust enough to cover now and preserve and protect for the future. Thank you to everyone who participated. Thank you to everyone who commented, who shared, and thank you for listening so diligently for the past hour. And I wish this bill a safe passage to the Honourable House. Thank you.